Okay, I want to talk briefly about biochem um, and how to benefit from from the course at Loma Linda. I should say from the get go, I'm not a big fan of the course at Loma Linda. It's got a lot of holes in it, and the advice that the teachers give is not well rooted in strategies that actually work for boards, in my opinion. So I think so. What I want to do here is focus on what the course at Loma Linda does have to offer you, and kind of tell you how to independently um, get a good handle on this information in 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 other ways, rather than really trusting this course um, to be to be an exhaustive source for you. I think that would be a mistake. So what they do offer is questions, and that's kind of how the course works actually. Before the lecture, or it's not even really a lecture, it's a time to come together and discuss kind of. But they'll give you these questions. They're quizzes online, and they're due at a certain time. And those questions, say that if there's 8 of them, 5 of them are probably high high yield questions. One is probably a a more difficult question that might might be high yield, but it's more like just difficult. And then 2 are probably just completely, boards would never ask this. Dr. Night-Eye or Dr. Wilcox they try to serve a dual purpose of challenging you to explore the literature and independently, become proficient in the literature. Um, I think that they fail to recognize that you need to be able to crawl before you can walk, um, when it comes to these topics. So they're gonna throw a few at you that are just ridiculous, and probably tell you that you're not not going to be a good doctor because you're not searching the literature and finding answers to these complex problems. And I'm going to say, okay, um, my statement to them, they'll tell you you're not an independent learner, you want to be spoon fed. And the problem is what they do sometimes just looks like lazy teaching. It's hard to tell the difference as a student, and I'm still not sure if they are just lazy teachers or they if there really is design behind it to try to coax you into becoming a more proficient independent learner. But anyway, I say to them, we are independent learners now. Help us get the basics so we can go from there. And anyway, they got some work to do on the course, but you can benefit from it if you know what they have to offer and you don't um, spend too much time in the other things that can get really frustrating. So they do have good questions. I'd say like 5 or 6 out of 8 would be a question that you might see on boards. So those questions that they're offering you are good, and you'll be able to kind of pick out which one of these made sense and which one was out of nowhere. And they have really exhaustive coverage of a handful of diseases. So when the thing about it is there's quite a few diseases that relate to amino acids, and defects in amino acid metabolism, for example, or defects in uh, sugar metabolism, for example. And they're to take amino acids as an example, they're going to really pound you on 2 high yield amino acid diseases: maple syrup urine disease and phenylketonuria. And that's good, and those are probably the 2 most high yield amino acid diseases, but there are other amino acid diseases that you need to know. So just to be aware of that. What the point that I want to illustrate is, while Dr. Night-Eye and Dr. Wilcox have things to offer, I wouldn't trust them as the basis of my organizational scheme. Um, I'd take the things that they're teaching as tidbits and try to fit them into a better organizational scheme, and one that's more oriented towards being methodically covering the material that shows up on boards tests. And then, yeah, there's a lot of opportunity for independent learning. If you expect the biochem department to deliver you a good course, you may be disappointed if you expect them to synthesize it for you and to tell you what's going to be on boards. Like, I don't know. In my opinion, they don't even know what's on boards. So I say take from them what you can and find another organizational system to serve as your foundation. And what I did was DIT for that. And the cool thing about DIT is it goes through first aid. And so this is page 102 in first aid. It summarizes all the pathways that relate to sugar, and it's even got some amino acids coming into all this pathway. It looks like at one point here, and this is an idea you could use, I probably gave up on it because I hadn't done it from the start, so I wasn't methodical, but I've got these little PDF notes in here, and so right here between galactose and galactose 1-phosphate there's a disease, and so I could use this like a flashcard actually, because I've got that note there, and okay, it's galactose kinase deficiency, and I've got some stuff about the presentation. So spatially that helps me to use a map over and over again, and I'll remember, like, oh yeah, this was the guy up here who had cataracts, and this was the guy down here who had a benign disease where he just had fructose in his pee, and so that kind of helps me. But the fact is that I let DIT walk me through all this stuff, and I'll say I thought DIT did a pretty decent job of sussing out the high yield stuff for the metabolic pathways. I did the DIT during the biochem course during the year. As we went through the course, I did DIT, and then I did it all again right before the biochem mock board, and I surprised myself with a really good score on the biochem mock board, which I wasn't expecting at all because I felt like our course was kind of weak at our school. So that was good. And besides metabolic pathways, the other thing that is high yield and considered a part of biochem is just knowing about DNA and RNA and protein structure and transcription, translation, how each of those work and what enzymes, and then genetics falls in the same category too. So for genetics, I thought first aid and DIT did a pretty good job of telling you. I mean, there's a ton of autosomal recessive diseases and there's a ton of autosomal dominant, but the fact is that the tides of normalcy just, they tend to test certain diseases, and the ones that first aid tells you, here's your autosomal dominant diseases, these are the ones that they tend to test. If they're going to ask you a question based on a concept, relating to this picture, it's 8 times out of 10 going to be one of these diseases that's on this list. And yeah, so I trust this stuff pretty well, actually. Even though it's not exhaustive, it is what your questions are going to come from. So that's good. And then, so I've kind of divided it, I guess, biochem into 3 areas now that I've just mentioned. I'll type this out for you. We talked about metabolic pathways and the diseases that arise along those pathways. So I'm saying DIT is a really good source for that. And I'll put first aid in parentheses because that's what it's taking you through. That's what DIT takes you through. Also, DIT's workbook is useful as well, and anytime you're using DIT, you can use the workbook. And then for the genetics, I also trust DIT and first aid. But for transcription, translation, I don't even know what this topic is called, like molecular genetics. I guess I'll call it that. When I say that, I'm referring to all that tiny stuff and those enzymes that, helicase and DNA polymerase 1, 2, and 3, and which ones do bacteria have and which ones do human have. Kaplan really dialed that stuff in nicely. Had good pictures. It was a good teacher, and so the Kaplan Review course, if you have a copy of that, um, is good for that stuff. It really helped me synthesize that. Um, so I think, let's see, have I said what I wanted to say about the course? Remember, yeah, it's an opportunity for independent learning. You need to grab the bull by the horns, and in relationship to each of these topics, I think that these sources are a good way to grab the bull by the horns in each subset of information that falls in the genetics category. And have fun with it. Learn it your own way. It's your brain. Design it how you want to, and I think you can do well.